Hey everybody, welcome back to GR Research, where we're going to go over another speaker upgrade. But first, let me give you guys a little bit of an update on what's going on at GR Research. We've got things that we're dealing with, just like every other industry out there right now, and that is trying to get raw materials in. And we're going at this as hard as we can. It's hard to get capacitors in, it's hard to get inductors made, it's hard to get no-res material made, it's hard to get everything manufactured right now. There's just seems like there's a shortage of raw materials across the board. It's tough, and we're doing everything we can to stay up. And I know we've got orders that are coming in, they're going out. Some are waiting on ports, some are waiting on inductors, and then those are coming in, and then the next group of orders are waiting on some capacitors to get here. And it's almost it's really difficult. It's been really difficult to get everyone what they want, but I want everybody to know we're doing the best we can, and we're stocking up on everything to try and buffer ourselves a little bit. Last month I actually ordered a full semi-trailer load of no-res. That's the largest order of no-res that we've ever done, and they've told me that they may not be able to get enough raw materials to provide a full 53-foot trailer load of it. They may can only fill half a trailer load because they just can't get the raw materials. I said, okay, then give me half a trailer load, and then 2 or 3 months get me another half of a trailer load. So that's stuff we're dealing with right now, and hopefully things get better. I know out there in the contractors and the builders and stuff that are everybody's going through the same thing. So trying times. Be patient with us, guys. We are working on it. And also, I've had a lot of speakers sent in recently. You guys besieged me with speakers. They're on the work table behind us. They're just lined up over there. And I'm going to get through them as fast as I can, but it's pretty tough. And I'm about 5 weeks out right now, so you guys start sending. If you're sending me something now, it's going to be a little bit before I can get to it. And this one was in here for a little bit. It was just, it's taken us time to get on it, and I'm trying to answer everyone's phone calls and emails, and I'm still answering 80 to 100 emails a day. So guys, please keep those short. I know my responses sometimes seem a little short. That's because I'm answering so many. I enjoy reading a lot of those, and it's good interaction with the customer. I love when you guys call, but I can't do that every day, all day, for the whole day. So keep it in mind. If you're sending us messages, that's great. I'll answer your message, but try not to send me a book. Give me what can I help you with, and I'll try to do my best. Now, this thing, B&W, this is an HTM61. It is a speaker that I see often sold individually and used as a center channel. It can be used as a left and right main. And it's asymmetrical, so when you use this as a center channel, you don't have the same drivers on both sides. You have a woofer on one side, you have a mid-bass driver or mid-range on the other side, and the little tweeter in the middle. So if you're using it as a center channel, the measurements showed that if you moved left or right, the response completely fell apart in one direction or the other because of the time domain issues between the drivers. And the on-axis response was pretty rough too. So I kind of had my work cut out for me on this one. And I'm going to go through this one a little bit differently when we look at the before and afters. I'm going to look at them back to back so you guys can get a little bit better idea of what it is that I've done or what it is that I do with these things. And let's start with what do I see in this thing. Cabinet wise, it's fairly well braced. There's some bracing running through it here to stiffen it up a little bit, but it's still just, probably 19 millimeter MDF, which is a little smaller than a 3/4, but and done in this may be a wood veneer. I think this is an actual wood veneer. I don't know what they did on the front baffle. It looks like some type of composite that they've overlaid on it, and it looks okay. It looks nice. The binding posts on the back did have little steel nuts on them and terminals that are ferromagnetic. That was horrible. The wiring is your typical inexpensive PVC jacketed wire with push-on connectors. Boo. And The crossover parts. Well, the crossover parts on the lower woofer were they're just iron core inductors with electrolytic caps. You know, something inexpensive, and you can kind of get away with it considering this isn't playing up very high. The mid-range driver, which it's a massive driver, it has some air core inductors and some poly caps, and that includes what's on the tweeter. There's no high-end anything there, but it looks like Bennett made products, and fair, at least when you get to the mid-range and tweeter. The drivers, I know they look massive. They feel heavy. One of the reasons is they shielded these things. I don't know why they're still shielding drivers these days, but that's what makes the motor structure look so big. There's basically two magnets on here. There's a standard magnet, and then there's a bucking magnet that cancels out the field strength of the other as you get away from it. And then there's a shielding cup that may be in a nickel's plated or nickel composite something shielding. Same goes for the mid. So it's a massively heavy built, and cast frames, they do ring a little, but the way they're designed, there's not a lot of flat edges on them, so not a lot of ringing on there. Tweeter is uniquely built. There is a little damped chamber behind it that tapers down to a point. Kind of interesting there, and that works really well. This actually fell off, and I had to glue it back on. It goes back in a weird way. It just kind of snaps in, and then on the back side you have to put this little ring on and tighten it up that pulls the tweeter in a little bit and tends to hold it. So interesting drivers, not bad drivers. This thing, surprisingly, right back. Okay, this mid is actually a pretty high sensitivity mid-range driver. This thing played up around 100 dB sensitivity for pretty good range. Interesting driver. So let's look at the frequency response measurements, the way they were, and let's compare them to what I did, because I had to go through and design a whole new crossover for this thing to address some of the issues. So let's look at the on-axis frequency response, and I have you guys check this out. I have Ron throw it up as usual. Ron does a great job editing my videos. This thing has some holes in response. There's some pretty big suckouts. 2,000 to 4,000 and 5,000 hertz. There's a couple of pretty good little dips there. It's just unevenly balanced. And unlike a lot of the B&W speakers that are typically hot on top, this one was not. This one was voiced a lot softer, and the tweeter is down a little bit, and it had those big holes in it. So here's what I did with it. If you look at the frequency response now, super smooth. I mean, I really turned this one into a very accurate speaker. We're looking at just plus or minus a dB all the way across, super smooth. Since it was a speaker with dual binding posts, there was one set of binding posts for the tweeter in the mid, another binding post for the woofer. Let's look at how it measured individually. As we look at that, we see there's a pretty good little hump in the mid-ranger's response down low before it falls, so there was no nice smooth roll off into the lower woofer. It was a hump and then a dive, so they really didn't address that very well. The woofer has a nice roll off. It has a high order filter on it, so it's rolling off pretty smooth. But as you see where they sum, they're a little bit out of phase. You see the actual frequency response in red. It's nice and smooth there. It's actually brought down a level. The mid is brought down a level by the woofer being out of phase from it. So not a good way to set this thing up. And if we look at the new frequency response now with the crossover that I designed for it, you notice we'll see individual mid and tweeter, because I'm measuring these things externally and I'm putting parts on it as I go. And it's crossing around 1900. I know you people are going to think, oh my gosh, he's letting the tweeter play down that low. But it's still a high order network on it, and it's falling pretty sharply. So it's really not playing down much lower than it was, if any. It's just held flat a little longer and then taken a little steeper dive. And the woofer's response, I used a low order filter on that, just a second order, and you can see that its response is a little bit of a fall and then a little hump and then falls again. And the mid kind of mirror imaged that. The mid took a little bit of a dip and back up, and then it fell. But a nice smooth response, a nice smooth roll off. And the peak in the woofer and the dip in the mid kind of corresponded as they overlaid. It balanced smooth, and they were in phase. So that turned out really well. If we look at the spectral decay, we'll notice the original spectral decay, there's a little bit of stored energy at the lower ranges where this mid is playing down too low, and it's getting into this woofer's range. There's a little bit there. If we look at the new spectral decay, you'll notice now that the mid is controlled a little more, that's a lot more balanced. And the spectral decay on this thing looks super clean. I mean, it really is good looking spectral decay. Now, if we look at the horizontal off axis, and I'm measuring the horizontal off axis like this. I'm going left and right with it standing up. I'm treating it as an upright speaker. It tended to drop off fairly well in this direction. If we look at the frequency response after I was through with the new network, you'll notice it's again more balanced, and as you go left or right, it drops off less, and there's a little bit of a humped area there. And what is we got here? About 2,000 to 4,000 hertz in the off axis is about a dB proud, right in that region. That's a lot of it has to do with the surface reflections off of the baffle, but overall that's still super smooth. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Let's look at the vertical off axis, and what I mean by the vertical off axis is I'm on tweeter axis and I'm moving up vertically towards the mid, and if you look at the stock frequency response, you'll see it falls all to pieces. The drivers are out of phase as you start to move up, and there's this huge drop in the response. I noticed something similar as I went down. All in that vertical off axis things were a mess, which means if you lay it on its side and you move left or right, it's a total disaster. So using this as a center channel the way it was, quite the mess. Let's look at what it looks like now. Here's the new vertical off axis, and you can see this thing looks fantastic now. So as you can see on tweeter axis and moving up, it maintains a really smooth response. These drivers are in phase over a wider range. It looks good. If you were to lay it on its side now, as you move left or right in the seating position, it's going to stay very consistent. So much better as a center channel and much better as a left and right pair. This is going to give you a more even room response instead of room reflections in certain frequencies and holes in other frequencies. It's an even response in all directions, so a much more balanced speaker. If we look at the impedance, they had these things overlapping on each other quite a bit down at the bottom, if you remember where they were on top of each other. Well, when they're both playing the same frequency range, then you're basically sending signal through both of them, so the impedance starts dropping. And the impedance dropped to 2.4 ohms. Yes, this speaker had an impedance that dropped to 2.4 ohms. So if you had a home theater receiver out there that didn't like low impedance loads, this is not the speaker for you, especially with the way it was. It would be really tough on the receivers. When I was through with it, the impedance is pretty balanced and consistent. Because of the filter that I used on the woofer, there's a second order filter on there. It dropped it a little in that area in the crossover region, and a little below the crossover region. It dropped to 3.6 ohms, but overall it's an 8 ohm load the rest of the way, so pretty easy to drive and a lot easier for your receivers and stuff. So I didn't lay out all the crossover parts for this one. I didn't feel like it was necessary. You guys have seen what I do with these things. I designed a new crossover for it. It involves a few parts because it is a three-way design, and I totaled up all the parts using the ERSI air core inductors, sonic caps in the tweeter circuit only. I used the ERSI caps in the mid-range circuit, and I bypassed them with a little Gen 2 sonic cap, which is kind of a cheap and dirty way of speeding up the dissipation rate of those larger value caps. And it needs a set of tube connectors pretty badly. The standard binding posts on these things are pretty cheesy. It needs all new wiring. You definitely want to get rid of this, and you want to solder directly to the driver terminals without all these push-on connectors. So you get that, some heat shrink, some solder, and a sheet of no-res. The no-res is going to tighten this up a little more, do away with some of the cabinet resonances. So all of that totals to $469. And for $469, you can really make a great speaker out of these. I know it's up there into the price ranges of what it cost. I've seen this advertised at $750, basically $749 a piece. So it's not that bad. Now the price that I quoted, that's for a pair of them. So keep that in mind also. The $469 fixes a pair of them. So you get a $1,500 pair of speakers for $469. You can really transform this thing. So for half of that, and I'll consider cutting up a sheet of MDF and doing half a sheet if you guys want to just order it as a single upgrade. So half of that, and I can send you out everything you need to get this thing upgraded if you're using it for a center channel. I did look and saw Best Buy had them on sale for $4.99 a piece, so not too bad for the level of drivers that you're getting. It just needs a lot of help. I'm really not sure what the engineers over at B&W were really thinking on this one. It was definitely a rough frequency response, but it wasn't that hard to work with. I mean, it just needed some basic engineering principles applied, and it worked out really well. It was easy to disassemble. These things push on and finish out the look of the drivers really well. All you have to do is just kind of go around them and just pop these up, and they unsnap, and then you can unscrew the drivers and take the whole thing apart. It's going to be a little difficult to unscrew the stock crossover, and you may have to go in with a cutter and cut the little plastic tabs that it's sitting on and pull those out of there. But you can go in and gut this thing and go in and rebuild it with all the good parts, and it shouldn't be too bad. That's it for this week. I hope you guys enjoyed another upgrade. I hope you guys learned something from it. I appreciate you subscribing and clicking the little bell notification button so you know when the next video drops. That's it for this week, and we'll see you guys in the next video.